The Subcommittee on Human Rights and the Law will come to order. Before we begin this hearing, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and express appreciation on behalf of the U.S. Senate and on behalf of the people of Georgia for our witnesses today, for the courage and determination that you demonstrate by speaking out in public on this important issue. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for lending your voice to the effort to stand up for families across Georgia and across the country. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Mayor Kurt Wilson and the City Council, the extraordinary staff here in Roswell City Hall for their hospitality, for opening up this extraordinary civic space to the United States Senate today to hear directly from people impacted by the issues that we're discussing today. Thank you, Mayor, for your hospitality. I would ask that all who are present at this U.S. Senate Subcommittee hearing remain respectful throughout our hearing so that witnesses have the opportunity to make their voices heard and to contribute to the record. I would also note for those of you who may be here in order to express or pursue your personal concerns regarding your housing situation or any other matter, that while today's hearing testimony will be limited to those witnesses who are at the witness stand today, a member of my staff named Leticia Johnson is here. Alexia, would you please stand up so that everybody can identify you? Alexia? Alexia is coming back, and we will make sure that she's identified in just a moment. But a member of my team is here to meet with you, make sure we have your contact information, and follow up with you directly should you have concerns that we can pursue on your behalf. Now here's the background. 5 months ago, as chair of the Human Rights Subcommittee, I launched an investigation into the mistreatment of families by landlords in Georgia and across the country, and in particular on threats to the safety of children who dwell in dangerous living conditions. And what we found thus far is that too often landlords and large property owners and managers are securing and receiving massive federal subsidies while subjecting vulnerable families and children to dangerously unsafe and unsanitary living conditions. The subcommittee has conducted site visits and interviewed nearly 100 tenants, landlords, maintenance staff, housing attorneys, and policy experts across Georgia and the nation. The staff has reviewed court records, resident complaints, housing inspection reports and work orders, photo and video evidence, and extensive correspondence between tenants, landlords, and federal housing officials. We've heard from families who live in apartments plagued by severe mold and pest infestations, who lack basic plumbing, or whose floors were so rotten that they collapsed. We heard from a tenant whose child fell through a collapsed floor and another whose child was bitten by a rat. We've interviewed tenants who described balconies falling off their buildings, fires, violent assaults and shootings, inadequate safety and security infrastructure, elevator outages that left elderly Americans trapped in their homes without access to food or medication, and children who became sick from mold and sewage exposure. Yet the subcommittee heard time and time again that when many of these tenants asked their landlords for help, that help never came. And worse, they sometimes reported facing retaliation or eviction. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights includes a human right to an adequate standard of living, including housing. A home is more than a place to sleep. It must be a place of safety and of security. But for too many Georgians and for too many children in Georgia, home is instead a place of peril. We're here today because the mistreatment of Georgia families and children by landlords must stop. We're talking about families living in dangerous apartments, many of whom are paying rent to live in the apartments that are to be the sanctuary for themselves and for their kids. And yet they face the risk of black mold and rats, of sewage floods and stray bullets. And meanwhile, the property owners and property managers who run these properties are collecting taxpayer dollars while failing to provide a decent standard of living. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has obligations and enforcement tools to hold accountable the thousands of landlords and private property owners and managers who receive many millions in taxpayer dollars every year across the country. Yet we've found that some properties pass their HUD inspections even while residents are experiencing dangerous and unhealthy conditions. And it takes far too long to identify bad actors and to hold them accountable. So today we'll hear from current and former residents at 3 different properties here in Georgia. The subcommittee was able to confirm that 2 of these properties passed multiple HUD inspections in the past 4 years, despite severe issues reported to the subcommittee. We will also hear from 2 expert attorneys who represent tenants facing alleged retaliation for reporting maintenance and security concerns. I want to emphasize that this is an active and ongoing inquiry of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Human Rights. Our subcommittee will continue to investigate human rights violations in housing and elsewhere to protect families in Georgia and nationwide. I'll now introduce our witnesses with gratitude again for your appearance and testimony today. We will hear today from Ms. Miracle Fletcher, a mother, cancer survivor, and tenants' rights advocate who formerly lived at Trestle Tree Village in Atlanta, Georgia. We'll hear from Ms. Leticia Odum. Ms. Odum is the mother of 4 children and lives at Heritage Apartments in Griffin, Georgia. We'll hear from Ms. Deanna Hines. Ms. Hines is a mother who lives at Southwood Apartments in Morrow, Georgia. We'll hear from Ms. Esther Graph-Radford, a tenants' rights attorney representing clients here in Georgia, and Ms. Ayanna Jones, a senior litigation counsel at the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation with extensive experience representing tenants living in dangerous and unhealthy conditions. Before we hear your opening statements, we will swear in the witnesses, so I would ask that you all please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give before the subcommittee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may take your seats. And we will now begin with opening statements from our witnesses, beginning when you're ready with Mrs. Fletcher. Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. You may begin.
Chairman Ossoff and members of the Subcommittee of Human Rights. My name is Miracle Fletcher. I'm a 40-year-old mother, a rare cancer survivor, and a housing advocate. I am here today to share my experiences as a former tenant living in the Trestle Tree Villages apartments. In late 2018, I moved into Trestle Tree Villages to ensure I was able to afford to pay my monthly bills without assistance from family members due to complications from my previous cancer diagnosis. I moved into Unit 77A with a feeling of security and ease, thinking this was a safe, secure environment for myself and my children. Shortly after moving into my unit, I started to hear loud bubbling noises erupting from my pipes, centering from my bathtub drain. The sounds mimic the sound your stomach makes, as if the room is silent and a person hasn't eaten in a while. Little did I know, the rumbles would grow into a massive plumbing issues. My unit at 77A flooded constantly with an upload of raw sewage consistent with my neighbors flushing their toilets in heavy rainfalls. Floating pieces of fecal matter, even eaten food, toilet paper, and debris filled my bathtub, overflowing onto my floors throughout my apartment. The everyday smell of a foul odor of feces that would normally cause someone to cringe upon smelling it became the dreadful smell we endure daily. Our reality was not a Folgers and waking up in your cup moment. Instead, our mornings consisted of walking through contaminated sewer water to reach the restroom, to brush our teeth, and wash our faces while inhaling the vile-smelling odor, fumes of bowel movements drifting in the bathtub. Thoughts about the quality and sanitation of our water remained a constant and consistent thought in our minds. 4 months of daily exposure to raw sewage, floating discarded food, particles, fecal matter, and blood was extremely hurtful and inhumane. Despite reports to management, my daughter was taking a shower while my upstairs neighbor flushed her toilet. The content of her bowel movements covered my daughter's feet while she attempted to take a shower to clean her body. Instead, found her feet covered in feces. This was a horrifying experience for my daughter and myself as a mother. At that moment, I felt the pain of being unheard all over my body, leaving me empty without recourse or support. My children and I lived in uninhabitable conditions after consistent attempts to get management to address the severe plumbing issues related in the merry-go-round of emails to management, phone calls to the National Housing Compliance, leading to a dead end of hopelessness. After repeated attempts to seek assistance, my unit in 77A erupted with a non-stop flow of raw sewage that flowed over into my neighbor's unit, underneath the floor and baseboards. As my neighbors assisted in attempting, to salvage our things. The things in my unit discarded during previous months of exposure to sewage. Due to the consistency of the water flow in my unit, daily I utilized all the towels, covers, and any other material we could use to stop the water flow. Constant exposure to fecal matter and raw sewage contributed to my exposure to a bacteria and stomach infection. Finally, intense flooding led to our relocation from the downstairs unit 77A into the upstairs unit 77D. After moving into unit D, I, along with other tenants, came together and addressed concerns that we mutually shared. After partnering with other organizations to assist us in organizing, the pathway for us to get assistance for our concerns was still not clear. I started to research our HUD tenants' rights, uncovering HUD CFR Part 245, the rights for tenants to organize without interference from management. The Tenants Association canvassed, passing out flyers for meetings, rallies, and community resources. Due to our organizing during the COVID-19 pandemic, we experienced fines, retaliation, lease violations, threats of eviction, and the placement of any suspected community organizer, churches, or organizations suspected of offering support to us placed on the criminal trespassing list. Throughout all our efforts, we still felt unheard. Our rights were violated daily, yet the constant threats of losing our homes weighed heavier than the support we received from HUD. Our posted meeting signs removed, and oppressive treatment received for our unwavering commitment to upholding our HUD rights to organize. Living in one of the nicest neighborhoods in Atlanta, surrounded by $250,000 homes, yet isolated from the exposure to the nature preserve. Our children were climbing kudzu to reach the Beltline, or the blatant disregard for electrical issues, plumbing concerns, or massive water flood streaming from a utility hole sewer cover in our parking lot, causing massive flooding. A shared feeling of insignificance resonated amongst us all. My question, as well as the tenants at that time and still is today, where is HUD? How are we allowed to live like this? Continually organizing and educating ourselves prompted the Tenants Association to send more invites for meetings between management and HUD. This led to misscheduled meetings from management and the police enforcement officers being requesting tenants and organizers to leave the property. The constant fight for our association's acknowledgement overshadowed our main concern, the habitability of our living conditions. In late October 2021, I experienced issues concerning my water heater. Previously being reported, the water heater was left unfixed or replaced and declared unsafe by the gas company. From October until January 31st of 2022, when I moved out of Unit 77D, my children and I was without access to hot water. Today, I leave challenging HUD to implement a task force created of tenants with lived experiences of housing insecurities in partnership with HUD and the National Housing Compliance. The HUD Tenants Task Force will serve to ensure tenants' concerns for habitability of their living will be efficiently addressed urgently by HUD, placing the accountability on landlords, property owners to provide safe and healthy housing for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher, for your testimony. Ms. Odum, we will turn now to you. I might respectfully request if you can move that microphone so it's fairly close. That way everyone in the room will be able to hear your opening statement.
Hello, my name is Leticia Odum. I'm a 39-year-old.
And Ms. Odum, forgive me, if you could move that microphone just a little bit closer, I'd be grateful to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. I'm a 39-year-old single mother of 4. I'm so very grateful and thankful to be here and to be heard. I'm here to testify on my experience living in Heritage Heights in Griffin, Georgia. My kids and I moved to Heritage December 2019. As happy as we were to have our own place, it quickly turned into a nightmare, a constant nightmare. It all started in January 2020. From 2020 to 2023, my bathroom ceiling leaked every few days. I did it as I was supposed to, which was to call the office to put in work orders. Each time the management company told me it wasn't a leak. They blamed my upstairs neighbor, saying she was letting the toilet overflow or didn't have a shower curtain or the shower mat, and the kids were splashing water on the floor. None of those excuses made sense to me because of how much water was leaking and how much damage it caused. After constant leaks, my bathroom ceiling actually collapsed. This happened over and over, sometimes repeatedly in the same week. If it collapsed on a Friday and I called the emergency hotline, no one would show up until that Monday. So that leaves me and my children having to find somewhere to stay since that was our only bathroom. The only thing the management company ever did was replace the ceiling panels, but that didn't actually fix the problem. When the ceiling would collapse, the debris would fall into the toilet and clog it. It would cover the tub and get all over the floor. One time, my six-year-old daughter had no choice but to relieve herself in the sink because the toilet was full of the ceiling debris. This has caused unbelievable trauma for me and my kids. To hear your child cry because they're scared to go in the bathroom by themselves, that makes me feel less of a mom because my kids live in this environment. After making a complaint with the housing authority and nothing changed, I almost gave up. In 2021, I contacted HUD because I was told by the manager that they weren't going to continue to change the ceiling tiles. I was shocked, angry, and hurt. So I emailed customer service and told them, and they came and changed the tile. However, it still wasn't fixed. I continue to deal with this even today. It's my new normal. No one actually came and fixed my ceiling until 2023, after I found my angel, a local advocate named Sharon King. She helped me push for change. During this time, we dealt with intimidation, being lied to, and different men from the management companies coming in and out of my apartment, and sometimes without me knowing because a key to my apartment was being circulated amongst staff like a hot plate of food. Along with this issue comes the biggest problem, a roach infestation. My apartment has been infested for about 2 going on 3 years now. It's so bad that my kids and I never eat at the table in the kitchen due to the roaches being everywhere. I can't leave any food out, even to fix our plates, because if I do, there'll be roaches in our food. If I fix anything to drink, we have to cover our cups and cans with a book or something heavy, otherwise bugs will get into our drinks. My youngest 2-year-old does not want to go to the bathroom alone because of the roaches. It's been several times that I or my girls have been in the tub or the shower and the roach would fall into the water. When we When we are ready for bed, we all climb into my bed because my 6-year-old is afraid to sleep alone. Even being in my room is still scary. There have been times that roaches crawl onto the pillows we were using, under the sheets, side of the bed, the headboard, the walls, my dresser, and the TV. And because of this, I don't sleep. I'm afraid to move my mattress because I worry that the roaches may have a colony underneath it. My 6-year-old falls asleep with her hands covering her ears. I have asked several times for some type of extermination, and all I've gotten is pest control spraying around the kitchen and the bathroom. Whatever the spray is, it's not killing the roaches. I'm still killing all of the roaches myself. It is to the point that the building now totally ignores me. They have not responded to me since December 2023 when I asked for a plan to kill the roaches. So instead, I do my own pest control. In the 4 years that I've lived in Heritage, what I've been shown is a lack of human compassion and abuse of power. When will they be held accountable? When will it end? We deserve better.
Thank you, Ms. Odum, for your testimony. Ms. Hines, please will you now offer your opening statement? And I'd ask as well, thank you, that you use the microphone. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Deanna Hines. My two children, 1 4, 1 16, and I have been in my residence at Southwood Apartment Complex in Monroe, Georgia, since 2016. Ever since I moved in, I have had little issues that are now starting to be major issues. Since my time in Southwood, my ceiling has repeatedly failed, collapsed 4 or 5 times in 2023 alone. And for several months, I have visited the rent office or manager's office daily to report the needs for repairs. Each time the building only temporarily repaired my patches in my ceiling and everything, such as cutting a hole in the ceiling and replacing the ceiling panel that fell rather than repairing the ongoing leak that's inside of the ceiling. Sometimes maintenance just cuts a hole in the ceiling and does not return for weeks or months. I have taped trash bags to the gaping hole in my bathroom to cover up the hole because my children are scared to bathe in the bathroom. They stopped coming to fix it. My kids are afraid. When I told maintenance staff that I believe it was a pipe leak inside of the building that's causing all the leakage, the staff told me that they could not afford the renovations in the building to prevent this from happening again and again. The whole building is slanting and caving in, and they say they don't have money to fix it. After about some time, after about 3 years, maintenance supposedly fixed the pipes, but my ceilings continued to collapse from water damage and leaking. Once the ceiling collapsed while my 11-year-old then, who's now 16, was in the shower. He was bathing and he yelled for me. When I ran in there to him to see what was going on, he said the water was coming out of the ceiling. When I grabbed him to pull him out of the tub, the ceiling fell exactly where he was bathing at. I felt very hopeless and terrified that I couldn't protect my child from a ceiling. On November of 15, 2022, which I call the day of everything collapsing in our household, my son, who was 3 then, who is now 4, was walking through the living room and the ceiling began to leak and it fell. As soon as he walked past my couches, it fell on him. Well, not on him. It could have been, I'm sorry. It fell literally right behind him. And even then I felt hopeless. So I called the emergency line, which is maintenance, to contact them and let them know that what had happened. This was at 3 a.m. in the morning. They came at 10 a.m. that morning. It took the building several months to repair my kitchen, which had also failed. In the spring of 2023, my kitchen and bathroom floor started to collapse. You can feel the vinyl sinking between the beams when you stand on it. And you can see the beams poking through the floor. My sons and I have to jump from beam to beam because we're scared. I'm mostly scared that they could fall through the floor at any given time while they're using the bathroom. Okay, it's caving in, and I feel at the moment I will be, or my kids will be, in the basement of the floor. Sorry. Ooh.
You take your
Sorry,
time, Ms.
I'm like picturing this up.
Take your time, Ms. Hines. There's no rush at all.
Thank you. Okay. I have told the rent office repeatedly of my floor, and they just come and look at it. My floor is caving in, and they say, or that the maintenance man says that in order to fix the floor, they would have to tear down the whole complex just to fix the floor, so they can't do anything about that. So they don't really care that our life is in danger. My front door is also not closed all the way. You can see outside and in the house through the opening of the door. You can fit your fingers through and pull it open if you wanted to. The rent office told me that someone had to kick my door in, but no one has ever kicked my door in the whole time I have been living in my apartment since 2016. I told them no one has kicked it in. They tell me that they're going to have someone come fix it, but no one still hasn't showed. Although I have reported these issues frequently to the building management, as of January 2024, no one has come to fix my floors or my door. But they came to look at the floors and the door, and I have not seen anyone since February the 7th of 2024. These things and so much more are falling apart around me and my family. I don't have the means to move right now, and I feel trapped somewhere. I no longer want to have my family living, nor do I feel we are living in a safe environment. The rent office seems to think that we are people in the lowest society because we receive based on income apartments, that we don't deserve to live in a healthy environment. And my kids don't deserve to grow up in a healthy environment. My 4-year-old, who is about to be 5 tomorrow, has developed asthma and cannot be in an apartment all the time because of the mold that's building in our apartment. It started to become a health issue, and the rent office just doesn't care or wants to put the money, or doesn't want to put the money into repairs to fix it rather than patch the problem. I am just disgusted with the way the apartment is right now and the management. My hope is to have a better service, and in the future that we all deserve, low income or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Ms. Graph-Radford, please.
Good morning. I'm Esther Graph-Radford, and I run a private law practice that represents tenants in housing across Metro Atlanta. I work closely with Legal Aid and the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation and local housing nonprofits, and I do a lot of work educating the community and tenants and other lawyers about tenants' rights. Cases that I work on deal with landlords not repairing properties, landlords retaliating against tenants who ask for repairs, housing discrimination, and unfair and deceptive business practices by landlords and management companies. I personally have lived in subsidized housing as a small child. Some of my earliest memories are of being a kid in the East Side Hills Section 8 project in Farmerville, Louisiana. What our kids are going through in subsidized housing is personal to me. My tenant clients are mostly working and disabled women with children. Some of their landlords get money from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs or from a county housing authority in the form of Section 8 vouchers. Some landlords are getting money directly from HUD in the form of project-based rental assistance. And some landlords are getting millions of dollars from the government to buy and renovate their properties in the form of low-income housing tax credits. Usually, the same landlords are benefiting from multiple subsidies and a combination of subsidies at the same time. In exchange for these millions of dollars of subsidies, these landlords are supposed to be providing housing that is kept up to a basic repair standard. The lights and the water and the heat are supposed to work. The toilets are supposed to flush. People are supposed to be able to cook meals, take showers, get a full night's sleep, have their friends over, do homework, hang up their clothes in the closet, put cereal in the kitchen cabinet and milk in the fridge. All of the basic things that we do at home. The sad truth, as we're hearing this morning, is that subsidized landlords in Georgia who are getting government rent money often are not providing the basic housing that we, the taxpayers, are paying for. I frequently see that landlords are neglecting maintenance to the point that they are endangering their tenants. Most of my clients are in Metro Atlanta, but I get calls from people across the state. I frequently see situations where sewage is backing up in people's apartments because of old and broken down plumbing, not once, not twice, but chronically, to the point that families are expected to live in homes that are continually soaked in raw sewage and have no working bathrooms. Some of my clients have to use the bathroom at a neighboring business or in buckets lined with plastic bags. I see extreme rat and cockroach infestations. A lot of my clients in subsidized properties can't store food in their kitchen cabinets because the rats will just tear into it and eat it and urinate all over it. They can't put food in their fridge or cook because the appliances don't work. I see horrific mold because of unmitigated water leaks and sewage backups. I see lead in drinking water. I see situations where families have no heat or air conditioning for months at a time. I see collapsing ceilings and floors full of asbestos, rotting structures where you can see right down to the dirt below, and families are putting boards down on the floor so that they can walk to the bathroom without endangering their lives. I see vacant units piled with garbage that share walls with occupied apartments. And there seems to be very little meaningful enforcement when tenants report these repair issues. We often see that local code enforcement will issue citations and take a landlord to court. The landlord will simply pay a fine and continue the same behavior. When HUD or the Department of Community Affairs inspect, they either are missing the worst issues in occupied units, or they simply take the landlord's word for it that issues have been repaired. There is often not meaningful re-inspection, especially since COVID. For housing choice voucher tenants, the end result is often that they simply lose their housing and are displaced. There's no real consequence for the landlord. We often see that landlords retaliate against tenants who ask for repairs. People outside Metro Atlanta are often just out of luck for finding legal representation or alternative housing. This is leaving the most vulnerable Georgians without a safe home base. Kids cannot thrive in school when they were woken up by rats running across their bed, and they can't take a shower because the tub is full of feces. Parents cannot work when they sleep crowded in one mattress with their children because the other bedrooms are covered in mold and sewage. This is an issue that impacts every aspect of Georgia families' lives, and I thank you for listening and paying attention.
Thank you, Ms. Graph-Radford. Ms. Jones, please.
Good morning. My name is Ayanna Jones, and I have been an attorney for nearly 2 decades. Throughout my career, I have made it my mission to serve low-income tenants and underserved populations in the state of Georgia. In my first 7 years of practice, I worked with Georgia Legal Services Program to support communities beyond and outside the Metro Atlanta area. And for the last 7 years, I have represented low-income tenants within the City of Atlanta, the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. During the entirety of my career, I have been able to connect with advocates across the country, and we all have witnessed similar challenges in the affordable housing sphere. Thank you for allowing me and us this opportunity to reflect upon our experiences, our journeys, and share the challenges that we have all witnessed in the affordable housing landscape. Today, I come before you not only as an advocate for affordable housing, but as a voice for those who are too often overlooked and neglected. Low-income tenants living in substandard conditions within apartments that have been subsidized by HUD. On a daily basis, this marginalized group faces poor housing conditions, mismanagement, while project owners continue to benefit from large financial subsidies intended to be used to prevent these problems. Here are just a few examples of what my clients have had to endure for months and sometimes years on end. One mother came to me because her preschool-aged child fell out of a second-floor window twice on 2 separate occasions as a result of rotted window casing. Improper repairs left gaps that led to water intrusion and clear disintegration of the wood. And once we brought the issue to property management, they just boarded up the whole window rather than make the necessary repairs. Another client, an elderly grandmother living in housing with her daughter and her granddaughter, had an entryway closet that was literally full of black mold. The grandmother was undergoing chemotherapy and had to walk with a cane, and the floor structure of the apartment was so rotted away in some areas that it was dangerously uneven and soft in many places, making it difficult for the grandmother to even get around safely in her own home. A woman called me, literally from the top floor of her townhome, desperate because there were rats in her kitchen downstairs, and she was terrified to go downstairs to get any of her food. She had already stored what food she had in large plastic bins, but the rats had previously chewed through them, and she just didn't know what else to do. Due to mold and rot and moisture, my clients have shown me literal dangerous growth of mushrooms and fungus coming off of their walls, the ceiling, and even out of their furniture. These growths pose serious health risks to their young children, and they either have to throw out furniture or resort to donated furniture. One of our clients was actually trapped in her home because the sewer had overflowed outside and there was raw sewage surrounding her home. Management promised to come and pump the water, and she ended up having to wait for hours upon hours for the waters to recede so she could at least walk out of her back door to pick up her children for school. These aren't just mere inconveniences. Are flagrant violations of human dignity and the right to live in safe and decent conditions. And these violations are in direct conflict with HUD's purposes and mandates. By not acting quickly and with the full force of law behind it, HUD has allowed these property owners to place their profit over the health and safety of children and their families, the populations that overwhelmingly rely on affordable housing. Although HUD has an inspection and reinspection process, tenants are not included enough in the process. Once a property is flagged for poor conditions, HUD relies on the certifications of the property managers that these health and safety violations are remedied, but the tenants are not contacted to verify that the issues have actually been fixed. Even when the property continues to fall short of its obligations, HUD is slow to issue abatements and defaults in order to force the property managers to comply with basic health and safety guidelines. My clients often come to me when they are at the end of their rope. On more than one occasion, they have reached out to property managers in person, via text, email, and rental portals to request repairs. And often their only point of contact is with the front office staff because they were never provided the numbers for supervisors or even HUD local offices that could oversee the management. And even when the compliance line is contacted, there is no guarantee that anything will be done to remedy the situation. I assisted several clients at a complex where the managers failed to make sure that the trash in the dumpsters was being picked up. The property had several vacant units, and tenants were forced to put their overflowing trash into these units, which are adjacent to units where people were living in. Despite urgent calls to management and the HUD compliance line from tenants and advocates, the trash continued to pile up. I saw rats running rampant through the piles, and the smell was horrible. Eventually, a local philanthropic organization offered to donate funds to pay an independent contractor, 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I'm sure you've heard, to haul the debris from some of the more deteriorated buildings, and I was able to schedule the work. But this is not something that an outsider should have to do. This was indisputably a failing of management to which they were never held accountable. In these and other situations, the tenant is left with no opportunity for rebuttal to management's assertions to HUD, and the tenants face retaliation. Getting evicted is not an option tenants can consider when many of them are living paycheck to paycheck or just coming out of homelessness with their children. And so they will suffer in silence for as long as they can. We must ensure that HUD has the resources to conduct thorough investigations of subsidized properties, promptly address any violations, and enforce penalties for violations and noncompliance. Sometimes we forget how vulnerable we all are. We aren't like turtles with the ability to carry our homes on our back. We aren't like other species on this planet. We don't have fur or scales to protect us from the environment. Humans must have shelter. We cannot survive, let alone thrive, without good homes. Without a stable home, we have small chance of having stable and supportive neighborhoods and families. They provide the foundation for everything else that we could ever do or hope to achieve.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, for that powerful statement, and thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Jones, you made a couple points that struck me. I was reminded of a prior investigation that I led when I chaired the permanent subcommittee on investigations into the mistreatment of military families in privatized housing on post at then Fort Gordon, now Fort Moore. And we heard testimony in one of those hearings from a young Army officer named Captain Cho. He had been stationed at Fort Moore. I happened to then later see him a few months later. He was deployed overseas in Korea. He'd been living in some of this privatized housing on post at Fort Moore, and he testified that because of the mold running rampant in his housing unit, that his young daughter, his young girl, had broken out with a skin condition, was scratching herself to the point of bleeding at night. And I was reflecting on Captain Cho's powerful testimony at that hearing and what we've heard from our extraordinarily courageous witnesses today and your expertise. And of course, one of the great similarities is we're talking about tenants who lack power. In the case of these military families, they don't have a choice about where they're stationed. They don't have much of a choice about where they live, and there's no competitive market for these privatized home at defense installations. And we're talking about tenants here with few choices and little power. Because as you just pointed out, Ms. Jones, eviction is not a mere inconvenience. Ms. Jones, can you just talk us through what eviction means for a family in financial precarity, and particularly for children?
Yes, it has several consequences that are collateral damage. First, eviction in Georgia happens most quickly and than one of the other regions. You could be, pre-COVID, you could be served with an eviction notice and out of your home within 4 weeks. Even a voluntary move is difficult. Imagine involuntary displacement. You have to find new schools. You have to find new medical homes. You have to commute to work, all of these different issues. In addition, once you have an eviction in Georgia, it's public. The records from magistrate court are public. Anyone can search your name, which means that landlords, potential landlords, could look, find your name, see that an eviction was just filed against you, and deny you housing. What that does is it forces tenants who have faced eviction into a smaller and smaller market. And a lot of times that market is in substandard housing. And their conditions get worse and worse and worse until they have no recourse. It feels like they have no option. And they're living in substandard housing in neighborhoods that they are unfamiliar with, trying to commute back and forth to work when they were familiar with their route before, in addition to facing health and safety.
And one recourse is supposed to be HUD. I mean, I think one thing that's worth us all pointing out is we're talking about billions of dollars in public funds, taxpayer dollars, billions per year that flow to these project managers and project owners. And with the receipt of those taxpayer dollars comes obligations, duties of care to tenants. Now, Ms. Fletcher, did I hear you correctly? You testified that you endured sewage floods of feces, food, blood, and urine in your apartment every day for 4 straight months?
Yes, that's correct, Senator. For 4 straight months consistently, my apartment flooded from the bathtub drain, which was kind of, confusing at the time, which I referred to earlier about the bubbling noises from the bathtub drain. So my drain would fill up with the sewer water from the drain and just fill the whole entire tub. And then my actual toilet would fill and overflow onto the floor. So if someone, say it rained and someone may have cooked noodles or something and flushed it in the toilet, sometimes you would actually be able to see like the noodle pieces like floating amongst the debris and the fecal matter in my bathtub. And this would be like all over our floor consistently.
And Ms. Fletcher, you testified that your daughter was coated in raw sewage while taking a shower?
Yes, she was. She was actually taking a shower, and my upstairs neighbor actually used her restroom, and we were pretty close at the time, so she flushed her toilet, and the contents of her toilet actually came up in the restroom, in the bathtub, while my daughter was showering, and it was actually fecal matter and blood in the shower with my daughter.
How did it feel seeing your daughter endure that?
It was humiliating. I felt very, very hopeless. I felt degraded. I felt as if my quality of life or my daughter's life and who we are, it didn't matter. And the standard in which we were treated, it was very, 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 very hurtful. And it actually caused me to like feel extremely sad, disheartened. And as a mother, it's your job to actually protect your kids. So in that moment, I felt helpless and powerless because despite me actually, identifying these maintenance issues in my apartment, I still had no way to prevent this from happening consistently to myself and my children.
You described to subcommittee staff, I understand that you contacted management, you reached out to the emergency line. Did you get a response?
Actually, several times I actually didn't get a response. There were days that I actually sat and I waited with no one actually coming. But understanding like the process and procedure that we had to take in order to get recourse or the procedures put in place for us as tenants, I actually emailed National Housing Compliance, which was, to my knowledge at the time, the way that we as public-based rental assistant tenants, get recourse for our maintenance concerns, but still nothing was done to help us.
So you reported this to National Housing Compliance. What happened then?
Basically, nothing really happened as far as anything being done for my maintenance concerns. Nothing happened until the unit flooded to the point of just no return, to where the water actually made it over into my neighboring unit, where we actually needed like wetbacks in order to, get the water up. That's how consistent the sewer and raw sewer was throughout the apartment. But even with me, emailing my maintenance, emailing the landlord leasing team, and also actually sending emails to National Housing Compliance, I still got no help until from October to maybe November, when they actually moved us. But the flooding had been consistently going on for 4 months.
How was the new unit?
The new unit was similar in how it's actually made, but I didn't have the flooding inside the new unit, but I also received issues with my water heater the entire time that I was there. The same process and procedure, emailing the leasing team, letting them know about the water heater.
What were the issues with your water heater?
So basically, the water heater sometimes would just shut off. So originally, when I first started to notify maintenance and notify the leasing team about it, they would send maintenance in, and what I would think would be them maybe relighting the heater or something. But that happened for a few months, and then up until I think it was like October or November, after I was inside the new unit, the gas company had to come out. And when the gas company came out to actually check the water heater, the gas man that was there actually told me that the safety had been bypassed on the water heater and that it was inoperable and it was unsafe, not only to myself but to the other residents in my building and community, in order for them to actually light the water heater. So I still, even after that was there, and the gas man actually left a notification in writing about this, no one still came to actually replace my water heater or even just address the issues at all. So I just lived there without hot water.
So no safe access to hot water?
No safe access to hot water.
I think, Ms. Jones, I think it was you, I wrote it down, you said these are not mere inconveniences. I mean, anybody in this room with young children recognizes that lack of hot water is not a mere inconvenience. I mean, for a family, that's a full-blown emergency.
Yes, it is.
The inability to bathe your child in hot water is pretty fundamental. So you were in one unit where you had constant sewage leaks, and you described those in vivid detail to us. You were moved to another unit where you didn't have safe, reliable access to hot water. So you told us about forming the Trestle Tree Tenants Association to advocate for the rights of tenants in the apartment complex. And you described what you called retaliation. Can you please tell us what the property managers did after you formed the Trestle Tree Tenants Association?
After we came together and reorganized, we received numerous lease violations. The process of us actually being acknowledged as a tenants association was very stressful for us all, because the concern from management was the validation of who we were and our identities as tenants. So we requested that our identities not be revealed because we all were very afraid of losing our housing. So we received lease violations. Management created a criminal trespassing list, which violated numerous organizations from Housing Justice League, from Parkside Equity Coalition. Teachers that were actually working at the elementary school where our kids attended were placed on the criminal trespassing list and banned. The church that actually was providing food during the pandemic, and when a lot of our tenants out there, were not receiving SNAPs and food assistance, the church that were bringing food every day, feeding our children, were put on the criminally trespassing list. So anyone that management felt as if they were supporting us or helping us to organize was put on a list and banned from the property. But us as tenants, we continued to organize. We didn't stop. We started having our meetings. Once we couldn't have our guests on property, we started meeting outside the gate on the sidewalk so that our guests could come. We ended up partnering with food pantries within our neighborhood. Myself and other tenants used our cars to go and pick up food. So we basically created our own community resources. We organized a Trestle Trees giveaway where we wanted to give back to our community, and we passed out toiletry items to our families and our children there. We did a 1-year anniversary where community partners came in and we cleaned up the field near our apartment complex. So any time that we wanted to create or go into this partnership with management, it wasn't about us fostering an environment where it was hostile. We presented this in a way to our management team for us to partner and be proactive about even the trash and litter, for us to teach our children, to protect their environment. We put trash bins on our porch and still receive lease violations for trash, and even having the trash bins when maintenance and management complain.
And Ms. Graph-Radford, you represented Ms. Fletcher in a case against the landlord, correct?
Honored to do that, yes.
And you won a settlement?
Yes, that case did settle.
I should note for everybody that we've received reports from tenants at HUD subsidized properties across Georgia of eviction threats when complaints are made, of what are described to us as spurious fines, even threats of arrest for reporting dangerous conditions, whether to the landlords, to code enforcement, or to HUD. Is Ms. Fletcher's experience an isolated one? Help us understand the issue of retaliation in this context.
Yeah, everything that Ms. Fletcher said is absolutely true. And these are widespread tactics, to the point that when someone calls my office, I can almost give them the checklist of what's happening to them because I see it so often. So what we see very frequently are, you can't evict someone from a subsidized property without good cause. So if you want to retaliate against a tenant who is organizing other tenants to ask for repairs or who is being a squeaky wheel about health issues, you've got to manufacture a reason. So a lot of times what we see is that tenants are hit with lease violations that are completely up, and these lease violations come with the threat of eviction, and they come with fines. Sometimes these fines are not monetarily large, but when you are already struggling to feed your kids, getting a $10 to $25 fine can be terrible. I have seen that, as Miracle said, a lot of times organizers, community organizers who have the right to be invited onto the property under federal law are threatened with criminal prosecution if they come onto the property. I see that management companies will form competing management-controlled tenant associations to try to muddy the waters. That is also illegal under federal regulations. You know, I see that landlords have preemptively written letters to the Department of Community Affairs or to HUD blaming quote-unquote troublemaker tenants, meaning tenants who are asking for repairs and telling other tenants to ask for repairs. Landlords will preemptively falsely accuse them of causing damage to the property. I see a general atmosphere of rudeness and surveillance. And when I subpoena text messages and emails, I see management companies and management staff gloating about the ability to bully and intimidate tenants in day-to-day interactions who asked for repairs.
Thank you, Ms. Graph-Radford. Ms. Odum, I'm looking here, and I regret that I can't make this available to the whole room, but I'm looking here at a photograph. And I think you have a folder in front of you, Ms. Odum, Exhibit A. Can you confirm, I'm looking here at a photograph of your bathroom ceiling collapsed in large part into your toilet, correct?
Yes.
Now I'll ask that this be entered into the record. You testified that for 3 years your bathroom ceiling repeatedly collapsed due to water leaks, and that when you reported these issues to maintenance staff, they told you it wasn't a leak, they blamed your upstairs neighbors rather than inspect and repair the pipes. How did that make you feel?
It was actually pretty frustrating, and it angered me a lot, because this picture actually is, I know it looks bad, but it's actually a decent picture compared to a lot of other times that it happened. You know, sometimes it'll be like 1 or 2 panels, sometimes it will be the entire bathroom. So it was very frustrating because we only have one bathroom, and when you don't know, when it starts to leak and you don't know if it's going to fall in on your head or your kid's head, or, I mean, it's scary. It's very scary. And it's so many times when it happened, you know, I would tell them, hey, it got a leak. It's not a leak. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever it is, it's a problem because it's causing damage. And, you know, I've had to replace a lot of things in my bathroom. Shoes, you know, when your kids taking a bath, they take the shoes. And so I've had to replace a lot of things and not be, I've never had help replacing this stuff.
How has this been for your kids, Ms. Odum?
Oh, it's bad. When the ceiling first started collapsing, my 6-year-old would always come get me and say, I gotta use the bathroom. She would never go in there by herself. Sometimes now she may, but just recently, after they claimed that it was fixed, it just started back leaking again. So she sees the small stain and the small leak. Now it's back to come in the bathroom with me. You know, she will not use the bathroom by herself. Like when they're in the tub, it's like an anxiety, like she has a panic attack sometimes because she does, if she hears the, 'cause it's so thin, you can hear every single thing. Like you can hear when they're bathing, you can hear when they use the bathroom. So if she hears water running, it's like, it's time to get out, you know? And my 2-year-old, she just, same difference, you know. It's bad because, you know, to know that this is where you live, this is your home, but your kids are constantly afraid to use the bathroom or go in the kitchen or sleep in their own bed or just walk in the hallway without something terrifying them.
And I'm looking at Exhibit B here. I think you have it in front of you, Ms. Odum. I'll also enter that into the record. This appears to be dozens, and I mean dozens, of roaches on a trap under your fridge. What's it like for your kids living with a roach infestation like that day in and day out?
It's very traumatic. It's very it's very traumatic. Like, no judging nobody, but you know, I didn't grow up, you know, living like that. So when I first moved there, I didn't have the issue, but then when I started to see it, and that picture is up under my refrigerator. So I had bugs in my refrigerator. I put that trap down myself because no one was helping us, you know? So I'm like, I noticed this. Now at the time too, I was dealing with rats. So I decided to put the traps down to see if I could catch all the bugs, you know, just whatever. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I actually seen the trap myself. So my kids are very traumatized. Like, one bug, they can see one bug, and I can tell the difference between playing, screaming, and terrified because, oh, she's seen a bug, because she's screaming like, I know she's terrified. Like, you know, sometimes people think you get used to certain things, but something I just haven't been able to get used to, or my kids, you know.
And you've reported the ceiling collapsing, the infestation repeatedly to the landlord?
Repeatedly, to the point where even after I reporting it to them and I noticed that they didn't care, I went to Housing Authority, and Housing Authority didn't care. They didn't help me any. Then after that, you know, only help I got is when I found Sharon King. Like, other than that, I reported it to the point where I started to just email so I could have a paper trail, because they started to say, if you say you called up there, well, I don't remember that. You didn't call up here. Well, I didn't know that was happening. And I'm like, but this is the same person I've been talking to for years about this same situation, but she doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't know, you know, I don't remember that. So when Sharon started holding them responsible and accountable for it, and we started to email, it seemed to me like things started to change a little bit, but it took a lot.
Yeah, you know, Ms. Odum, I mentioned earlier the situation at formerly Fort Gordon, now Fort Eisenhower. I think I may have inadvertently said now Fort Moore, still getting accustomed to the renamed bases, but at formerly Fort Gordon, now Fort Eisenhower, we saw the same thing for the military families there, with work orders, with maintenance requests going ignored for weeks or months when they were urgent. And I thank you for sharing your testimony with the subcommittee today. Ms. Hines, you live at Southwood Apartments in Morrow, correct?
Yes.
And you testified that your ceiling has also collapsed multiple times since you moved in. One time it almost injured your son, correct?
Yes.
Now I've got Exhibit C here in front of you, and here again, everyone, we're looking at a photo of trash bags taped across Ms. Hines' ceiling to prevent the collapsing ceiling from coming down on your kids. Is that what we're looking at here, Ms. Hines?
No, right here, the ceiling has already collapsed. I put the bag up because they cut a hole into the ceiling, all the whole, half, basically really most of it. And it's really over where the water comes out from the bathe with, from the shower head. And water is not, when my children is bathing or I'm bathing, water will come straight out of the ceiling while we're bathing. So to prevent us from getting wet or at least try to take some type of shower, we put a bag up because they wouldn't come fix anything.
And you testified that you're also concerned about your floors collapsing, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
The floors, like my kitchen, if I can demonstrate, my kitchen, I have my sink area and my refrigerator area, and in between that we have a dryer and a washing machine and my microwave. If you go into my kitchen, the kitchen going this way, so all of my appliances and everything is starting to lean over to where my washing machine is starting to tear up and shake around. And if you can slide across the floor, it's uneven. But the worst part of the floors is the one that's inside of my bathroom, where it's literally, once you step in the bathroom, you feel like you're finna fall through the floor. It's like a floor, and then it's beams from what I guess what holds the floor up, and then it's the concrete, and it feels like the concrete parts are just seeping down, and we have to jump from the floor to the beam to the beam to the toilet.
So your roof collapsed, and now your floors are caving in.
Yes.
So your kids are skipping from beam to beam. I have it in my notes here that you reported this around June of 2023. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when did a maintenance crew come and give it a proper inspection?
Around October or November. It was a long time before they even came. And then they just recently came again in February just to look at it again. But back in October and November, they told me that they can't do anything about it because they had to tear the whole building up just to fix the floor. So they can't fix my floor because they would have to tear the whole buildings down. And my floor is not the only one, because my neighbor upstairs is also collapsing to where she's going to be downstairs with me if her floor falls. And if her floor falls down onto me, we're going to be definitely in the basement. And it's not just the bathroom, it's also my living room, my hallways, my room. It's certain parts of the floor where it's just collapsing. But the restroom is the worst because you can actually feel it. And even at night, like when you go to the restroom and you get up, you go to the restroom, you get ready to come out of the bathroom, or you're going into the bathroom, you forget because you have sleep. And you always forget to jump the beams. And I feel like I'm about to fall through the floor, and all I am doing is just sliding across the bathroom because it goes like a hill in my house. So I have to jump.
It's still not fixed?
Still not fixed.
Thank you, Ms. Hines.
Yes, and I wanted to say one
Yes,
thing,
ma'am.
if you don't mind.
Of course.
What they're explaining as far as their apartments, which is so sad, I know it's all off subject, but mine is the same thing. I have a roach infestation. I have toilet coming up. I have where they use a wet vac to vacuum the outside of my apartments, so the housing or anyone that comes to look at the apartment knows or won't think that it's a whole sewage leak under my building. My bathroom smells like diapers, which makes my whole house smell like baby diapers, and I mean like a baby is sick type of diaper. It stinks. And how your apartment is and how yours is, that's how mine is. Like, and it's sad that all of us is having the same issue.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Ms. Graph-Radford, if you have a folder in front of you, I think exhibits D, E, and F. Do you have that, ma'am?
I do.
And you testified that landlords in Georgia who are receiving federal government subsidies are not providing decent, safe, or sanitary housing. Can you tell us about these exhibits, D, E, and F? Can you describe those, please, to the folks who are tuned in across the country in our audience here?
Absolutely. Exhibit D is a photograph that a family that I represent has given me permission to share with the subcommittee. This is in a Metro Atlanta property that receives both low-income housing tax credits and a large number of Section 8 housing choice vouchers. So this landlord got help to buy this property, and they're getting help every month in the form of rent subsidies as well. What we're looking at in these photographs is the black congealed sludge of months worth of an entire building of feces and sewage backing up into every bathroom. So what you're looking at here is the congealed result of months of sewage backups in Exhibit D. This was never repaired, obviously, and as you can see from these photographs, it was never cleaned and sanitized.
I'm looking at what looks like a bath. This is a bathtub?
This is on the top photograph is a bathtub.
This is a bathtub full of contaminated sludge.
Of feces and sewage sludge.
And what do we have here in Exhibit E? A lot of garbage I'm seeing.
The bottom photo is one of the showers in the unit, and that is the sewage sludge that has coated the bottom of this shower after months of consistent sewage backups in this building. I mean, you can imagine, obviously no one can use this bathroom. You can see in the corner of the top photo that the toilet seat is on the ground. And what you can't see is that next to that, above the toilet in the wall, there's been a huge hole cut out in the wall. There's open, exposed, leaking plumbing. The entire bathroom is covered in a mixture of feces, sludge, and construction debris. This family could not use either bathroom in their unit. They had no functional bathroom in their unit.
So let's talk about HUD and the inspection regime at HUD. We heard about appalling conditions from multiple witnesses today at different properties that receive federal taxpayer dollars. According to documents reviewed by the subcommittee, Southwood Apartments, where Ms. Hines testified she lives and has faced what she described as repeatedly collapsing ceilings and floors caving in, what we found is that it passed its HUD inspections in both 2021 and 2023, and I have both those reports here. I'm entering those into the record. Does this surprise you, Ms. Graph-Radford? What does it say about HUD's oversight and inspections process?
Not surprise me. As a taxpayer, I have been shocked and deeply, profoundly disappointed at the way that HUD's physical inspections fail taxpayers and tenants alike in Georgia. HUD does these inspections. First of all, to be clear, they're not inspecting every occupied unit. I'm not completely certain how HUD chooses the units that they inspect on these properties, but they're not inspecting every unit. What I have seen across multiple properties is that since the pandemic, HUD's inspections have dropped off in frequency and in thoroughness. And even when HUD identifies housing, health and safety issues on these properties, they're relying on the landlord's word of honor that they've been fixed. Often re-inspections are not happening, especially since COVID. And I have specific examples of that in mind, if you're interested to hear them.
What I would suggest is that you submit those in detail to the subcommittee. We'll make sure they're part of the record, and we'll have our team go through them in detail to make sure we're getting all those facts into the inquiry.
Absolutely.
And Ms. Jones, you testified that your clients have faced unimaginable scenarios. I mean, we're talking about a child falling out of a second-story window due to a rotted window casing, someone trapped inside their unit due to rising sewage. No one should have to live like that. And that's really the bottom line, isn't it? No one should have to live like that.
No one. You wouldn't sentence your worst enemy to live in some of these apartments. You wouldn't let your dog live in some of these apartments because there's no lighting. HVAC hasn't been cleaned in years. The children are living, as you noted, with rashes, with sleep deprivation, with asthma conditions, with respiratory disorders. I don't know how they're going to school. I don't know how they're getting up and going to school because you can't, it's not even a question of thriving. It's a question of living. Your home is sacred. It's your safe haven from the world. And we have too many tenants who don't have a safe haven anywhere. They can't go home because it's not home.
And we could hold, months of hearings on just the connection between these living conditions and the rest of life. I mean, we're talking about kids who, as we've heard today, can't even eat in their own kitchen because of infestation, can't safely bathe, are afraid to use the toilet alone. I mean, how are these kids expected to do homework? How are these kids expected to get up in the morning ready for school? We are putting these kids, by allowing these property managers to pocket across the country billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, while not just failing to maintain the basic standard, but in some cases, we've heard today, and we've heard from multiple members of the panel today, retaliating against, targeting, intimidating tenants who report unsafe conditions. We're failing children across the country by allowing this to continue. Can you talk about the impact, Ms. Jones, on young children of living in conditions like this?
Yes, so my AVLF has a pilot program called Standing with Our Neighbors. And the object of that program is to place teachers and community advocates in specific neighborhoods, in schools, where we know there's a high degree of transiency, where we know there's a high level of eviction. And the reason that we do that is because if you have a school that has 40% turnover, meaning almost half the kids that start the year are not going to end the year there, then you have a problem because the children cannot learn. I used to be a former educator, and on average, getting acclimated, the teachers getting to know the students getting to know the kids, is a hard process on a good day. On a bad day, when you have constant interruptions and disruptions, there's not a lot of learning that can happen. And then those children, inevitably, if they aren't learning, then they're falling behind. And then they're getting blamed for that as well. So there's this feeling of guilt because I can't seem to succeed. No child, no person wakes up saying that they want to fail. I'm going to go into class and fail this test today. That does not happen. Children are naturally resilient, but we're asking too much of them. We ask them to have to live in these circumstances and succeed. We're asking too much of them. We're asking too much of the teachers. We're asking too much of the parents to require them to have to live in these conditions and still show up.
Ms. Jones, what are HUD's obligations and what enforcement tools does it have at its disposal?
So ultimately, we talk about the safe, decent, and sanitary housing. HUD has to perform physical inspections of the property. If the property fails, especially if the property fails along health and safety exigencies, things that are emergencies, the property owner sends an oath that they sign in front of a notary. A lot of times what I've seen is they'll send the work orders from their own maintenance staff to try to demonstrate that they fixed these issues. If after that certification, there's generally no reinspection. They just take the owner's word for it. If the property has fallen below a certain score, then HUD may come out a year later. But again, with COVID, that didn't happen. Or they were doing these visual inspections where the property owner was taking the video and sending it in. They're requiring the bad actor to justify themselves, and they're not asking the victim. So HUD, along the lines of that reinspection, let's say they find that there's still poor conditions. HUD has several tools. It can issue a notice of default, letting the property owners know that they are in default of their contract with HUD. Based on that default, if they're still not remedied, the conditions are still not remedied, then HUD can do an abatement. That abatement is, we're going to terminate this contract. We're going to withhold money. Once they supposedly withhold that money, then that can lead to a termination of the contract. That process can take years while nothing happens for the tenant. Nothing remedies those conditions. And it definitely can happen more promptly than it has been happening.
I mean, we even saw, my understanding is that, for example, in the infamous Forest Cove case, that HUD did not even issue a notice of default to Millennia, the property manager, until 2022, a full year after the City of Atlanta condemned the property and 4 years after the property had received its last failing inspection score. Is that correct?
Yes, and the property had received several failing scores.
As we've heard today, some properties are receiving passing scores without, it seems, due diligence having been undertaken to determine the truth about living conditions within. When you contact your clients' landlords about maintenance and safety concerns, Ms. Jones, what do they typically say to you?
That it's the client's fault. So some of these issues that we're seeing with the sewage, what I'll hear is they're just nasty. They're poor housekeepers. They need to take better care of their homes. Well, sewage, the plumbing, is not an issue for the tenant to resolve. Infestations typically cover whole buildings. That is not an issue that the tenant can resolve on their own. You can put as many roach traps as you want. The roaches will just go to another apartment and come back. And so all of these issues continue to occur.
I want to close by asking each of our witnesses one more question. So for Ms. Hines, Ms. Odum, and Ms. Fletcher, and again, I want to express gratitude on behalf of the U.S. Senate for your courage in coming forward today and testifying on the record and under oath about what you've been through. I want you to know that it makes a difference that you're speaking out. It makes a difference that this subcommittee, and therefore the Senate of the United States, hears your words, has this in the record, is informed by your experiences. If you could just describe to us here why it is you've decided to make your voice heard and to tell your story in public today, beginning with you, Ms. Hines, please.
I decided to come and basically speak because I wanted to be heard. It's like no one hasn't been listening to me. It's no matter how much I yell, cry, scream, or fuss, no one's listening to me. So I came here to be heard, and like you thank me, I thank you for listening to me. It's like I did not have anyone listening to me, and I wanted someone to listen to me on my issues in my apartment.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Ms. Odum?
Same with me. I just wanted to be heard. I felt like a lot of the issues I was having was falling on deaf ears. I also felt like it is unfair, not only for me and my children, but other people who are afraid to speak up, and some are going through worse than I am. I just feel like I can, in some kind of way, give them a voice too. So I'm also thankful to be heard, because going through different channels trying to get help and you getting shut down every single time, it's kind of it's easy to just give up. So I'm just thankful to be heard.
Thank you, Ms. Odum. Ms. Fletcher?
For me, it is a lot of different reasons. It is me understanding the power in our voice, understanding that when we come together collectively, like, we can make a difference. And I didn't want my pain or all of the negative stereotypes that society put on us as low-income moms, low-income renters, you know, as marginalized families in Georgia. I didn't want that stigma to be the only thing that we're known for. And I wanted us to make sure, I wanted to be impactful and use my pain in order to make a change and make something happen for us. So holding HUD accountable for our habitability is the #1 reason. Thank you for just listening and taking the time to even do this, because no one, we feel like no one cares. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. And for our two experts, time is short. We got about 3 minutes of runtime here. But if you could, in a nutshell, and we'll follow up with you, obviously, in great detail, just describe the most important recommendation you would make to Congress on this issue. Ms. Graph-Radford?
listened to seriously, who are trying to keep their families safe in housing communities. Trust them. Know what their families need. Trust their critiques of the way that money flows through the system. And consider that they should be the first and primary voices consulted, making changes to how that happens.
Ms. Jones?
First thing I'll say is fund the mechanisms that are already there. Fund them not just on a minimum level. Fund them like your lives depended on it, because it does. I would say not just listen to the tenants because they speak all the time. Include them in the process. They are stakeholders just like HUD, just like the senators, just like taxpayers. They are stakeholders, and they, with their lived experiences, have the best knowledge about how to remedy the situation. And lastly, enforcement. Nobody's going to change their behavior if there are no consequences. There has to be meat and teeth behind those consequences.
Well, thank you, Ms. Jones. Thank you, Ms. Graph-Radford. Thank you all. And thank you as well to the audience here for joining us. Thank you again, Mayor Wilson and the City of Roswell for hosting us. I'll just close very briefly with the following. I mentioned earlier I've got a 2-year-old little girl at home. I got so used to calling her a baby, but I guess I can't really do that anymore. Now she's 2. But for all of the families across Georgia who feel what you, Ms. Hines, Ms. Odum, Ms. Fletcher, have described to us today, that you can't care for your children because of the situation that you've been put on, and that no one is listening, and that you're being ignored, and that you face retaliation when you do speak out, and that your child's at risk and you are at risk. The purpose of this hearing is to elevate your voices and to ensure that the United States Senate is listening. There are not easy answers and easy solutions, but I'm going to continue to fight for and work on behalf of families facing mistreatment by landlords here in Georgia and across the country. I want to again mention Leticia Johnson is on my team. Leticia, would you please stand up and raise your hand? If you are here with a particular concern that you would like addressed by my office, please introduce yourself to Leticia, and she will take down your information and follow up with you. The hearing record will remain open for 1 week for statements to be submitted into the record. Questions for the record may be submitted by senators by 5 p.m. on Monday, March 11th, and the hearing is adjourned.